At every family dinner, Ethan Walker had a role to play. The quiet one, the disappointment, the brother they talked over. He was the afterthought, the polite nod, the half smile that barely reached their eyes. Ryan was the golden boy promotions, fancy suits of fiancé who seemed to complete the picture. Ethan just Ethan. But that night at a glittering charity gala, when Ryan's fiancée turned to him and asked, "Wait, you're the CEO of PathLink." The air seemed to stop. Forks froze. Conversations halted. And for the first time, every eye in the room was on Ethan. The man they'd written off was about to rewrite the story. Ethan Walker sat at the far end of the long, polished table, the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. Laughter drifted around him, clinking glasses polished small talk, and the hum of Ryan's voice filling the space like static. Ryan had always been the center of the story. Tonight was no different. The gala sparkled with crystal chandeliers and curated conversations, a room full of the city's elite, and Ethan sat quietly unnoticed. Until it happened. Emma Hayes, Ryan's fiancée, the polished, perfect, soon-to-be addition to the Walker family, glanced across the table, her brow furrowing. Her eyes locked on Ethan like she was solving a puzzle she didn't know existed. Her voice was soft, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Wait, you're Ethan Walker?" she asked, her voice lifting with a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "The CEO of PathLink." The air changed. Forks paused mid-bite. Conversations died in mid-sentence. Thomas Walker, the patriarch, set down his wine glass, his eyes narrowing, searching Ethan's face for a reality he hadn't prepared for. And Ethan, he sat still quiet, as the world finally turned to look at him. Ethan Walker wasn't the kind of guy you brag about at dinner parties, at least not in the Walker household. Thomas and Linda Walker had a clear picture of success, and Ethan never fit into that frame. Ryan was the blueprint, polished, ambitious, the golden boy. He wore tailored suits, drove a flashy car, and knew how to fill a room with his charm. Their parents loved to introduce him. Our Ryan, he's on his way to becoming VP, just closed a multi-million-dollar deal. Ethan, he was a free spirit, that's what Linda called him, with a soft, nervous smile, like an apology wrapped in maternal concern. Ethan is still figuring things out. He's very creative. Creative. The word is both a label and a cage. What they don't see are the late nights, the empty coffee cups that pile up, the endless hours Ethan spends in his tiny apartment, coding, building, dreaming. PathLink isn't an accident. It's a lifeline born of years of quiet determination. But the Walkers don't ask about PathLink. They don't ask about Ethan's dreams or his purpose or the lives his platform has touched. They ask about Ryan's new apartment, Ryan's promotion, Ryan's fiancée. Ethan has been invisible for so long, he's almost forgotten what it feels like to be seen. Until tonight, when a single question from Emma Hayes opens the carefully curated family story. Ethan could pinpoint the moments that built the walls between him and his family. There was the night of Ryan's big promotion dinner, when Ethan had quietly mentioned PathLink's first grant from a major nonprofit. Linda had smiled, but it was the tight, distracted kind she always used when she wasn't really listening. Thomas didn't even acknowledge it. The conversation flowed right back to Ryan, who was discussing stock options over a glass of red. Then there was the time Ethan sent an email to Ryan, an actual ask for advice. PathLink had landed its first 50,000 users, and Ethan wanted Ryan's perspective on scaling. The reply was a single line. "Congrats, man, but tech's risky. Maybe it's time to think about getting a real job." That one stung, but what cut deepest was overhearing his father, on a call with an old business partner. Ethan hadn't meant to listen in, but the words drifted through the open door, sharp as glass. Ethan's a good kid, but he's just not like Ryan. He's still playing around with that website thing. We try to be supportive, but, every family has that one child who drifts a little. Drifts. That word burned. Ethan had wanted to walk in to say, "You don't know what I've built. You don't know who I am." But he didn't. Instead, he sat with the bitterness, swallowing it down, telling himself it didn't matter, that he didn't need their validation, that PathLink's growing community, the families finding hope, the patients connecting to care was enough. And it was, until tonight, when Emma's question sliced through the noise like a blade, and Ethan realized they never saw him because they never wanted to. Ethan had tried to speak up before. Once at a family brunch in between bites of avocado toast and clinks of mimosas, he'd mustered the courage to mention PathLink's first major milestone, 50,000 active users. His voice had trembled slightly hopeful, waiting for a reaction. Thomas had barely looked up from his phone. "That's good, Ethan, but don't get too comfortable. The tech space is volatile. Just make sure you've got a backup plan." Linda had smiled tight and practiced already turning to ask Ryan about his latest business trip. Ryan, he'd offered that same condescending smirk, the one that said, "I'm trying to be the supportive brother here, but we both know who the real success is. Good for you, man. But, it's probably time to think about something more stable." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the chest stable again. The subtext wasn't subtle. What you're doing isn't real. It's not serious. It's not success. And Ethan, he didn't argue. He didn't defend PathLink, didn't explain the hours of unpaid labor, the nights spent debugging code until sunrise, the emails from families, thanking him for creating something they desperately needed. He just sat there, swallowing the words, the anger, the ache. Because what was the point? They had already decided who he was, Ethan the dreamer. Ethan, the one who drifted. Ethan, the one who never quite measured up. So he played his part, letting the comments wash over him like waves, each one eroding a little more of the belief that maybe someday they'd see him. Until tonight. Until Emma's voice, sharp, clear, cutting through the static, shattered the script they'd clung to for so long. The moment Emma's voice cut through the noise, it was as if the entire room had tilted. "Wait, you're Ethan Walker, the CEO of PathLink." Her words hung in the air like a suspended breath, too loud, too sharp, impossible to ignore. Conversation stuttered to a stop. Forks hovered mid-air. The soft clink of glassware faded into a heavy, stretching silence. Thomas's face froze, his eyes narrowing like he'd just been handed a puzzle he couldn't solve. Linda's mouth fell open slightly, her perfectly manicured hand instinctively clutching at the pearls around her neck. Ryan's confident smirk faltered just a flicker, but enough for Ethan to catch it. The shift in the room was palpable, a ripple spreading outward as Emma's words sank in. PathLink. That's the platform my cousin uses for his healthcare. Emma continued, her voice rising slightly, the gears in her head turning fast. He said it's been a game changer, connecting him with specialists managing his appointments. It's huge. How did I not know you were behind it? All eyes were on Ethan now. For a moment he considered downplaying it, shrugging it off, taking the easy way out. But something inside him snapped into place, a quiet, steady defiance that had been simmering for years. He straightened in his seat, his voice calm even. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm the CEO." The impact was immediate, like a pin dropped in a room full of glass. Thomas's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Linda blinked rapidly, her breath hitching a soft, shaky inhale that seemed to pull the air from the room. Ryan's fists curled under the table, his knuckles turning white. Ethan could almost hear the silent recalculations, the mental math, as they tried to reconcile the image they had built of him, the aimless dreamer, the one who drifted with the truth, now sitting undeniable in front of them. Emma leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting respect. Curiosity, maybe even admiration blooming in her eyes. She glanced at Ryan, a subtle question flickering across her face. "Why didn't you ever tell me this?" And Ethan, he stayed still, not gloating, not smirking, just steady. For the first time in his life, he wasn't shrinking into the shadows. He was exactly where he was meant to be. The silence at the table was suffocating, thick like fog. Ethan could feel every pair of eyes locked on him, his father's sharp and calculating, his mother's wide and glassy, Ryan's dark with something between disbelief and seething resentment. Emma sat frozen, a half-drunk glass of champagne trembling slightly in her hand. For a moment, no one spoke. The air buzzed with the sound of muffled conversations from the other table's forks, clinking softly against plates, and the muted thud of Ethan's own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then Thomas cleared his throat, a sharp grating sound that shattered the tension, like a glass cracking under pressure. "Ethan," he began, his voice low, measured, almost forced. "Is this true? You built PathLink." Ethan didn't flinch. His gaze met his father's squarely, his voice calm and even. I did. The weight of those two words settled over the table like a lead blanket. Linda's hand flew to her chest, her breath catching in a soft gasp. Her lips moved, searching for words, but nothing came. She looked at Ethan as if she were seeing him for the first time, and she didn't know what to make of it. Ryan sat rigid, the tips of his ears flushed red, his jaw clenched so tight, a muscle twitched in his cheek. His hand rested on the table fingers, drumming a slow, uneven rhythm against the linen, a quiet but unmistakable pulse of anger. Emma was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. PathLink. My cousin's doctor recommended it after his accident. It's huge. I've heard people in the industry talking about it. You created that? Ethan nodded once slowly, the tension in his chest finally loosening, even as the silence around him grew deafening. Thomas shifted in his chair, his face flushing a deep mottled red. He opened his mouth, likely to regain control, to downplay, to spin, but no words came. For the first time, the man who always had something to say, who had built his identity on being the voice of authority, sat speechless. And Ethan, he felt a strange quiet calm settle over him. For years he'd waited for this moment, for validation, for recognition, for something. But now, sitting in the thick, stunned silence of his family's disbelief, he realized he didn't need it. He never had. The room was still reeling from Emma's revelation when she dropped the next bombshell softly, almost like an afterthought, but her words sliced through the air like a blade. You know, I actually tried to get PathLink to partner with my family's foundation, she said, her voice light, almost conversational. We've been looking to fund innovative healthcare solutions, and PathLink kept coming up. We were so impressed by its impact. Her gaze flicked to Ryan sharp, questioning, almost accusing. Funny, though, when I mentioned it to you, Ryan, you told me it wasn't worth looking into, that it was just a small side project some guy was running, that it wasn't scalable. The words hung in the air like a slap. Ryan's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His polished facade cracked, the smirk nowhere to be found. Ethan watched a quiet storm brewing in his chest. Not anger, not anymore, but something sharper, colder. He looked at Ryan, really looked at him, and in that moment, the years of dismissive comments, the patronizing smiles, the subtle digs, all of it came into focus. Ryan had known. He'd known who Ethan was. He'd known what PathLink was becoming. And instead of acknowledging it, instead of offering support, he'd chosen to keep it buried, because admitting the truth would have meant sharing the spotlight. Ethan didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Emma's face shifted, realization dawning, her gaze darting between the two brothers. Thomas and Linda sat frozen, their expressions a mix of confusion, shame, and something close to fear, as if the ground beneath them was shifting, and they didn't know how to stand on it. Emma spoke again, her tone softer now, almost apologetic. I can't believe you never told me, Ryan. You knew my family was looking for projects like this. And Ethan, he's the one actually making a difference. Her voice trailed off, but the damage was done. Ryan sat stiffly, his knuckles white, his lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the quiet weight of the moment settling around him. For years, they'd written him off as the underachiever. But tonight, the script had flipped, and they were all watching silently, helplessly, as the truth unfolded in front of them. Ethan had never needed their permission to shine, and now they couldn't dim his light if they tried. Ethan could have let the silence hang, could have let them squirm in their discomfort, but not tonight. This wasn't about being polite anymore. He leaned forward, his voice calm, measured, each word landing like a slow, deliberate strike. You know what the funny thing is? He began, locking eyes with Thomas, then Ryan, then Linda in turn. For years I tried to tell you. I tried to explain what I was building, what PathLink meant. And every time you either ignored me or dismissed it as a hobby. His gaze sharpened, a quiet storm, brewing beneath the surface. I asked for advice once, Ryan, when we hit our first 50,000 users. You told me to get a real job. You didn't even read the article I sent you. Did you? Ryan's face flushed deep red, his jaw clenching so tight it looked painful. And Dad, Ethan continued, turning slightly. I heard you telling Mr. Henderson I was the drifter, the son who couldn't figure it out. You didn't just underestimate me. You sold that narrative to everyone who'd listen. Thomas opened his mouth, but Ethan cut him off, his voice firm, unapologetic, steady. I'm not here for an apology, Ethan said. I don't need your approval or your advice or your validation. PathLink has helped tens of thousands of people. It's real, it's mine, and it's bigger than any box you ever tried to put me in. A slow, disbelieving breath passed through the table. Emma sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable, part awe, part guilt, part quiet admiration. Linda's eyes filled with tears, her fingers trembling against her glass. Thomas sat in stunned silence, his authority crumbling in the face of undeniable truth. And Ryan. He looked gutted, like a man who had just watched the ground shift beneath his feet and realized he wasn't the center of the story anymore. Ethan stood slow and deliberate, adjusting his jacket. "I think that's enough for tonight," he said simply. He nodded once to Emma, grateful not for her validation, but for asking the right question at the right moment. And without waiting for anyone's response, he walked away, leaving behind the weight of years of judgment, the pressure of unmet expectations, and the cage of family narratives that no longer held him. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like the outsider at the table. He felt like the one in charge. The cool night air hit Ethan's face as he stepped outside, and for the first time in years, he felt like he could finally breathe. He walked slowly down the street, the hum of traffic in the distance, the distant echoes of laughter fading behind him. His phone buzzed with notifications, missed calls from his mother, a text from Ryan, even an email from his father's assistant. But he didn't reach for it. Not tonight. Tonight wasn't about them. It was about him. For so long, Ethan had carried the weight of their expectations, the unspoken pressure to prove himself worthy of their pride. Every family dinner, every subtle dig, every dismissive smile it had built a cage around him, one he hadn't even realized he'd been trapped in. Until tonight. Tonight he wasn't the disappointment. He wasn't the free spirit they pitied. He wasn't the man they tolerated out of obligation. He was Ethan Walker, CEO, creator, problem solver. And more than that, he was free. As he walked, Ethan felt the tension drain from his shoulders, replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. He didn't need their validation. He never did. His story wasn't written by them anymore. It was his, and it was just beginning. Ethan's story isn't just about family expectations. It's about breaking free, about choosing your own path, even when the people closest to you don't believe in it. For years, Ethan let their doubts define him. But the moment he owned his story, everything changed. So here's the question. Whose version of success are you chasing? Are you living for their approval or for yourself? Drop a comment below. What's your PathLink moment, that turning point where you decided enough was enough? If this story hit home for you, give it a like, subscribe for more powerful stories like this. And don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your journey is yours to write, make it count.